Hey everybody, it's Paul here. Quick update in the life of my family and Pod 1 since we are now linked. My family and I had to put down our dog of 11 and a half years, Libby. Libby was a tremendously sweet, loving dog that I consider a fourth child. She will be deeply missed, and I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to commemorate her life and how special it was to my family. And with that, on to the episode.
Welcome to the podcast where we bring on remarkable people to tell their stories.
I'm Paul Gilman.
I'm Daniel Lance.
And this is Pod 1.
Aaron Albrecht is an activist, thinker, and accomplished old-time Missouri fiddler. He's actually the one playing the song you're hearing right now. This episode, Aaron gives us the lowdown on his love for the deep tradition of old-time music, the appropriately named precursor to bluegrass, folk, and country that goes back centuries. Ever the activist, Aaron also tells us how he led a forum on drone warfare while in college that culminated with a keynote speech by Colin Powell's former chief of staff, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, a prominent critic of the Iraq War and drone programs. Finally, if you are a purchaser of Amazon products, you'll be interested to hear about the year that Aaron spent working at an Amazon warehouse. So here's Aaron. Aaron Albrecht, thank you for being on the podcast, my man.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel and Paul. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great to have you on. Hold on a second. So the hat is?
Blues, St. Louis Blues.
Oh, yeah, their first one ever, right?
Yep, we won.
Yeah, that was cool. I was glad to see them win, for sure.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. I was so excited about that.
Where were you when they won?
Where was I now? I must have been I was in Edwardsville, Illinois, so right outside of St. Louis.
Okay, nice. Perfect.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about the intro tune that we heard at the beginning of this episode?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So that is a tune that I was playing on the fiddle there. It's a fiddle tune, a traditional fiddle tune from Southern Illinois. The name of the tune is Down in Little Egypt. And what you might not know is that Southern Illinois was always known as Little Egypt. And that's because the two rivers that meet down in Southern Illinois are the Ohio River and there's three rivers. The Mississippi, the Missouri meets the Mississippi, which meets the Ohio down in Cairo, Illinois. And those throughout the foundation of our country, when commerce was done on rivers and stuff, those were two of the most important rivers for travel, commerce. Those are the rivers that connect the entire country. They come together in that one point in Cairo, Illinois. And some of the best music has come out of Cairo, Illinois. Lots of your blues music, your traditional country blues music. People would come from Kentucky and Tennessee up into Southern Illinois and then over to St. Louis where ragtime music and blues music and country, that kind of music was known for coming right out of that part of the country.
And you're saying Cairo, and is it spelled the same way as Cairo, like the real?
Yeah. And so in Southern Illinois, they have lots of towns with Egyptian names like Cairo and Thebes and Memphis, and all those towns down there have Egyptian names. And well, what I was saying about those two rivers is just like the Euphrates and the Tigris,
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they call it Little Egypt. And this tune is called Down in Little Egypt. And it's a tune from where I grew up.
That's awesome, man. So when you were a kid, you played violin, which is physically the same thing as a fiddle, but the style is completely different. And so you were classically trained, and then at some point in your life, you became introduced to Missouri fiddling, the Missouri fiddling tradition specifically. Tell us about how that happened and how you got into it.
Sure. Well, first, I'd just like to correct you that a violin and fiddle are two different things.
and how are they different?
Well,
what's the difference?
In two respects. The first one is that violin has strings, but a fiddle has strings. And the other one is that, one you can spill beer on. So.
Yeah, one comes with a beer smell.
Right, yeah, that and campfires. Though, yeah, just like you're describing, I grew up playing violin, classical violin. I'd play in church, and both of my brothers played music. My oldest brother, Nathan, played violin. My other brother, Andrew, played piano. And at church, we were known as the Disciples. That was our band name. And we'd play hymns at church. And that was my dad's idea. He put us up to that whole thing, and none of us liked it. But now it's fun to look back at. And and so I grew up playing classical violin. I love classical violin music. I love classical music. But then later on, when I went to college in Missouri, there's a fellow who lived across the hall from me who also played violin, though he played the fiddle. And I'd never tried playing fiddle music ever before. But when I watched him do it, it completely blew me out of the water. And I decided I have to learn how to play fiddle music, And so that's how that all began.
Wow. And you really you took an almost obsession level interest in fiddle music. I didn't see it until you were already too far gone, basically. And you were telling me that you'd stay up at night not able to sleep because fiddle tune after fiddle tune was running through your head, and you had to just play it and rock back and forth like you're in some institution. So you really took a zealous approach to learning about fiddle tunes, and not just the tunes themselves, but the stories behind who wrote them and the culture of the people that enjoyed these tunes and wrote these tunes and played these tunes. So talk about that a little bit, the culture behind Missouri fiddling and some of the greats.
I'd love to. Thank you for asking. That's a great question, and one that I love talking about. And just like you're saying, yeah, there was a time, and probably still exists today, that I'd listen. Last night I fell asleep listening to fiddle music, right? So, and you were asking a little bit about, about the culture behind old time fiddling music, and this is our, one of our oldest pieces of heritage, living cultural heritage of expression that has existed all throughout our country before our country was even a country, right?
Yeah.
And there's different fiddle music. Traditional American fiddling music is played differently all across the country. Everywhere you go, they may play the same tunes, but they definitely play them differently. And where I learned to play the fiddle, we had our own way of playing the tunes, and a whole panoply of heroes, of fiddlers who's passed on this tradition from one fiddler to the next. Fiddling is something that you learn by ear. You learn from you learn from more experienced fiddlers. You don't learn by reading notes on a page. So that's one thing that makes our fiddling tradition unique, is that you don't learn by reading music off a page like you would in classical music. You learn by listening to fiddlers and trying to imitate and copy, and after a while create your own way of playing. And every fiddler has their own way of playing, and no two fiddlers sound alike, and that's for sure.
But it seems, especially in the old time fiddling traditions, that every great fiddler, they might not be like any other fiddler, but they can name off the top of their head 2, 3, 4 really great fiddlers that they basically give all the credit to for full on inspiration.
Absolutely.
So are there any of those for you? Who are some of your inspirations playing fiddle?
Yeah, my fiddling heroes. Yeah. Well, for those fiddlers that you mentioned, it was always the ones they learned from. And the people who I learned from, number one was my friend in college, the one who lived across the hall from me, whose name is Richard Shoemaker, who's my age, and he's from Columbia, Missouri. And he was what I would call a protege of the, a real virtuoso, a genius of the Missouri style fiddle, right? And he learned from a number of folks, though one of the main people he learned from was a man by the name of Dr. Howard Marshall. And Dr. Howard Marshall is another one of my inspirations and fiddling heroes who I've learned quite a bit about, not only the stylings of the music, not only how the music is supposed to sound, but like you were discussing, the history of our music and really what makes it great. And Dr. Marshall, I'm so proud to call him a mentor of mine because he's such a prolific scholar of the history of Missouri fiddling music. In fact, not only is he made a career out of, writing about the history of this music. Dr. Marshall is the chair of the anthropology department at the University of Missouri in Columbia, where he studied all his life art history, vernacular music, vernacular architecture of Missouri. He's another one of my heroes. He's working on the third book in a trilogy. This is his magnum opus of a trilogy of the history of Missouri fiddling music. And so right now he's working on his third book, which brings it to the present. The first book focused on from the founding of our country, throughout the 1800s. The second book focuses on the turn of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s. And the third book focuses on today and where this music is going in the future. So Dr. Marshall is another one of my mentors and heroes. And just to name a few others, the folks that I play with, and then, our fiddling heroes in Missouri are always Pete McMahon is one, Cyril Stinnett is another, Dwight Lamb is a third. You would have, Charlie Walden, of course, Bob Holt from down in the Ozarks, Cleo Persinger, Jake Hockemeyer. I could name you 20 of them. And
I know it.
And all of us have, few of us that play Missouri style fiddling have studied these masters, their lives, their recorded works, upside down and backwards, and do our best to sound just like them, even though we can't.
Yeah, it's so cool. I guess, we're in a time now when you can have inspiration not just from mentors, which will happen for a lot of fiddlers, but also because of this hybrid where you have super modern technology that allows anybody in the world to have access to these super rich and valuable archives of old time music. Anybody in the world can have inspiration from all 20 of those fiddlers in your head if they wanted to. So how do you feel about the way that it's such a deeply traditional and sort of person to person tradition in its roots, but now it's becoming this, anyone can go and teach themselves almost and just imitate from the internet. And now it's all technologically spread out.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Daniel. You've really hit a nail on the head on one of these most, core issues of, fiddling music. That's, one of the core issues that fiddling music is facing today. I mean, I remember listening back to some tapes of a fiddler from Springfield, Missouri by the name of Art Galbraith. He lived up until he died in the 90s, in the early 90s, and he died an old man. And in those tapes of him playing, you can hear him talking about when he was a boy, he was learning fiddle from his uncles. And when they would be sitting there and fiddling and talking, they'd be talking about what their parents told them about the Civil War. So here we have a tradition that's been passed on from the older generation to the younger generation throughout time that has remained, in one sense, has remained constant over time, but in another sense has changed. Though, but you can see how, in one fiddling generation, they went from talking about memories that therefore, people were talking about the Civil War, to when this fiddler, Art Galbraith, died, he had seen, airplanes invented, the dropping of the nuclear bomb, the invention of the internet, and all, in just such a few generations, the world had changed so much, and though fiddling in a sense had remained the same, though it did change in one distinct way, which is the way you're discussing here, which is the way people learn. In those days, people would learn basically from the people that lived in their community. Everywhere there were more fiddlers. Fiddlers were a dime a dozen. Everybody played the fiddle. The fiddle was the easiest instrument to carry around. It was a cheap instrument. You could buy it out of the Sears and Roebuck catalog. It was way more common than even a guitar. Today people think of a guitar being the most common instrument. Fiddle was by far more common, and fiddling music and was part of everybody's life in those days, in the sense that this was before TV and internet, all that. People would get together after a day's work and make music for their own entertainment. Communities would get together and hold dances. This is how they'd get to know each other. A lot of people would find their husbands and wives at pie suppers and dances and square dances and so much, and so fiddling and was really a part of the communal life of the people. Well, now that's changed very much, and now fiddlers, old-time traditional fiddlers, are very, not as common as they once were, especially ones that have learned from people who have learned in the old way. In other words, people who learned from people who learned from people who didn't have the internet or recordings or anything like that. And so now we're in a situation where I could go online, or you, Paul, could go online and listen to, fiddling music or any music from around the world and seek to recreate it. So in a way, it's really good, though in another important way, students are no longer learning from the masters as they did before. Instead, they're learning just by the internet. And I think that takes something away from the music, though I can't quite put my finger on it.
Fair enough. So you clearly love the history associated with it. What else about fiddling really gets you excited and can keep you up at night and helps you fall asleep?
Oh yeah, man. Well, the music is so exciting. The community, bringing people together and playing together, and the music, especially in Missouri, the quality to our music, we call it drive, right? And, if you're familiar with bluegrass, you know about drive, and it's that quality of the music that really makes you excited and gets your adrenaline rushing so I'd say bringing the people together, laughing, staying up late, and making good music. That's what I really love about it.
When was the last time you played the violin, Aaron?
You mean like Bach and Beethoven?
Yes.
Let's see here now. Well, I would have to say it would probably back in about 2015, I would say.
Will you ever play the violin again?
Oh yeah, I love violin. Though yeah, I'll play the violin again. I love hymns and Bach and all that. I love all that.
So have you been a member of a band?
Well, not as much. We had a band in college, Daniel and I and some others. And
but you're the entire reason I started playing old time music, pretty much. Yeah. Like my recollection of meeting you is you're kind of like dwarves in Lord of the Rings, where nobody really knows where they came from. They just kind of exist. And so at some point in my life, you just existed. And I don't remember exactly when we met, our introduction, anything like that. I just remember seeing you play fiddle. Miles was playing guitar, Miles Sullivan. And you were playing that thing like there's nothing else on the planet that mattered at all. Like it was just so much raw energy. And Miles had his head down. I couldn't see his facial expression, but I assumed that he was making the same expression. And I thought, this is something that I really got to be a part of. And it took this idea of old and kind of dusty music that you only ever hear on old black and white cartoons. And it injected it with so much life. And I was like, dude, young people can actually play old music and give it the energy that makes it gives it this unspeakable, like not unspeakable, but hard to describe quality to it. And so, yeah, I got a banjo and then started playing with you guys all the time. And you guys were really inclusive, even though I took away more than I gave for a good few months.
That's not true. That's not true. No, that's part of the fun of it. All the fun of it is bringing your friends in, and anybody can play this music. That's what makes it fun, is that anybody can learn it. It's not difficult music. It's one person once told me that it's easy to play, but it's hard to play well, you know. And yeah, that was the highlight of, you know, my grad school experience, was getting to become really good friends with you, Daniel, and Miles and Bobby, and a whole slew of other people that we played with really on a daily basis out there. And I look back so fondly on those memories. So
yeah, and I really think if we were to go back in time and not have the internet, not have TV, not have radio, not even have books that often, music would be king. Music would be all the entertainment. You know, like the clubbing of today, where you go out and, like, you know, dance in clubs, would be getting together in like the church house or the barn or whatever, and playing old music and square dancing or contra dancing or whatever it is.
Yeah, and they still do it today. They sure do. So,
Paul, you ever been square dancing?
Nice.
Oh, are you muted, sir?
A what?
I didn't hear you say. I can hear you now.
Yeah.
You have been square dancing?
Yeah. Yes, Daniel. That's Daniel taking a shot at my age.
Hey, dude, I've been square. I actually wouldn't have been surprised. I would have been surprised if you. I would not have been surprised if you hadn't.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I'm with you. So Missouri fiddling, is it found in central U.S.? I mean, it obviously goes beyond Missouri. It sounds like it's in southern Illinois. Where else is Missouri fiddling played?
Well, it's funny. Missouri fiddling, there's kind of a diaspora of Missouri fiddlers because of, you know, this globalized society we live in today. I mean, I would say, you know, in 1968, I think it was, Cleo Persinger, who's a Missouri fiddler, went down to Weiser, Idaho, and played in the National Fiddlers 1964 National Fiddlers Contest and won first place. Okay, and and later on, Cyril Stinnett must have been around that same decade, went up into Canada. Cyril Stinnett's another famous Missouri fiddler. Went up into Canada and won the National Canadian Fiddling Contest. Another fiddler of that ilk by the name of Pete McMahon won contests all over Missouri and even went down into Tennessee and won fiddling contests down in Tennessee. Now that would have been though prior to that, Missouri fiddlers from Missouri had moved west. And you can hear some relationship between the fiddling you'd hear in Washington State. Those fiddlers, got, the same fiddlers that moved west. You can hear some relationship between the fiddling you hear in that part of the world with the fiddling you hear in Missouri. In the same way, another one of our fiddling greats was by the name of Uncle Bob Walters. And he's known as Missouri style fiddling, though really what it's known as is the Missouri River Valley style fiddling, because it was the fiddling that was common around the Missouri River Valley, which goes all the way, where Lewis and Clark went all the way west. And so one of our most famous fiddlers from the Missouri Valley region was by the name of Uncle Bob Walters, and his family came from Tennessee. So this music has a history of moving around the country. Though I would say in today's day and age, the Missouri fiddlers are pretty much stuck in Missouri. I'm one Missouri fiddler that lives in Illinois. There's another Missouri fiddler that lives in Illinois by the name of Charlie Walden, has moved from Missouri up to Chicago. There are other Missouri fiddlers. One Missouri fiddler by the name of A.J. Strubis lives up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And another Missouri fiddler by the name of Richard Shoemaker right now lives in Mexico, in Acapulco or something or other. So Missouri fiddling can be found in different places, though Missouri fiddling is different from Midwestern fiddling. And even I'll just add this, that in Missouri, there's more than 3 styles of Missouri fiddling. There's Northern Missouri fiddling, there's Central Missouri fiddling, and then there's Ozarks fiddling. And those Ozark fiddlers even spill out into Arkansas. And so I would say in today's day and age, Missouri fiddling stays pretty well in Missouri, though there are certain exemplars of it who live in other places.
Very cool. What's Springfield? Is that part of the Ozarks, or is that considered central?
Springfield, Missouri?
Yeah.
That's right at the edge of that's the Ozarks.
Yeah, but just the northern part of the Ozarks, I guess,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a few months in central Missouri.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Where
Good
were
time.
you?
Fort Leonard Wood.
Okay.
This was right after you graduated college, right, Paul?
That's right. This is back in the early 90s.
And what were you doing there?
I was learning how to be an engineer in the Army.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great.
Fun times.
Did you hear any fiddle tunes while you were out there?
I did not, but one of the 2 guys I hung out with was from Missouri. He was an awesome dude. Loved hanging out with him.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a really cool state. We went once for a ragtime festival over in Sedalia, Missouri, which is the birthplace of ragtime. It's where Scott Joplin used to do his thing.
And I think Scott Joplin's dad was a fiddler. Scott Joplin himself was a fiddler.
I'm not surprised. I mean, he's a virtuoso on the piano, so
Yeah.
it's funny. So I would be playing. Sometimes I would start playing fiddle tunes from other traditions, like when I picked up the fiddle, and I'd bring them to Aaron or send him a recording or something, and he'd say invariably, he'd tell me, "That's a Missouri tune," as if all the tunes in the world came from Missouri in the first place, and I believed him. No, he didn't do that on every single one, but there were quite a few where you were like, yeah, dude, I'd be playing an Irish or like a Scotch Irish tune. He says, "That's from Missouri, man. That's a Missouri tune."
Well, we're proud of our goddamn tunes, I'll tell you that.
Oh man, I love it.
Hey,
Yeah.
so Aaron, you grew up in Illinois, central or southern?
I grew up right in the St. Louis metropolitan area. I grew up in the Metro East, so I grew up about an hour out east of St. Louis, so right in between central and southern Illinois.
Okay, gotcha. Tell us what it was like growing up there.
Yeah, so Edwardsville, I grew up in a town called Edwardsville. Edwardsville is what I would call a small town, but what the people who live in the towns around Edwardsville would call a big town, And Edwardsville is a town of 25,000 people. It's a college town. And, when I was growing up in Edwardsville, it was nothing but cornfields. And I've watched it change so much over time. We've got all kinds of strip malls in there now. And, it's been developed so much. It looks like Williamsburg now, believe it or not. And so growing up in Edwardsville, it's a great place to raise a family. My parents were, got married in St. Louis and met in St. Louis. And then when they were going to raise a family, they moved to Edwardsville because it was kind of your quintessential little bedroom community out in the country, kind of, and we had chickens growing up and rabbits and we had, so it was really a beautiful place to grow up in. And, I've got really fond memories of growing up in Edwardsville.
That's awesome, man. It looks like we just lost Paul, so I'm going to give him a second to get back on.
Yeah, should we put a pause? Should we hit pause for a second?
Sure. I guess
It goes out once a week, and I just found that out from my son, who's been home all the time for the last 2 months.
Why does it go out?
I have no idea. I live in the middle of nowhere. Who knows?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they probably got fiddle tradition up there in Ashland.
There's some people that know what they're doing. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure they do.
So when we broke away, and my apologies, you were talking about growing up just outside of, not just outside, but an hour's drive outside St. Louis.
Yeah.
Illinois.
Yeah, so I was saying that there, and I grew up in a town called Edwardsville, which is about 25,000 people. And when I was growing up, Edwardsville was nothing but cornfields, and now it's developed so much, it's incredible. There's strip malls everywhere. And and growing up in Edwardsville was a really great place to raise a family. You know, it was very safe place. And a lot of the folks that live in Edwardsville either work at the university in Edwardsville or they work in St. Louis. It was known as a bedroom community or something, because after sundown, you know, there were no cars out anywhere and nothing going on. So yeah, growing up in Edwardsville was really nice. I loved it. It was me and my two brothers. And, you know, we rode bikes all around Edwardsville and we're running around in the woods and
raising hell.
It was awesome. Yeah, I loved it.
Hey, so your mom is Costa Rican, and that makes you half Costa Rican. Could you talk a little bit about that part of your background?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. My mom is she's half Costa Rican. Her mother was from North Dakota and was a farm girl from North Dakota, and her father was from Costa Rica. So my grandpa grew up in Costa Rica, and he went to Catholic school back in those days, you know, school as part of the church. And he was the only student to get a scholarship to go to the United States to go to college. And they sent him to NDSU, which was North Dakota, they sent him to North Dakota to go to college. And that's where he met my grandmother, who was in college there. And he really talked it up to my grandma, made it sound like, you know, Florida or something. He took her back to Costa Rica. And so I hear the stories about when they got there, my grandpa, you know, they were going to, you know, build a house or whatever. And the houses down there are made of adobe, which is, you know, straw, mud, cow manure, rocks, you know,
baked
you
in
make
the
these
sun.
bricks baked in the sun. Yeah. And so they had the structure built, but they didn't have a roof, you know? So my grandmother was there with two babies, my mom and my mom's sister, my aunt, living in that house without a roof, while my grandpa ended up went back to the United States, I guess, to finish his degree or something. I don't remember. So my grandmother was down in Costa Rica with two babies, and my grandpa went back to the United States. And she never forgot that. Yeah.
So hold on. So your grandpa went to college in North Dakota as a Costa Rican, convinced an American woman to marry him, come back to Costa Rica, two babies with her, in a house with no roof, and then went back to America and left it there.
Yeah.
So wait a minute. A house with no roof. It rains really hard there from time to time, right?
Yeah, that's
times
right.
of the year where it rains really hard in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
The drainage, I hope, had to be fantastic.
Really? Yeah, I don't know how that worked. I'll have to go back and ask how that worked exactly. I don't know.
One of those two babies was your mom, right?
Yeah, one of those two babies was my mom. Oh. And I'll just say one thing about roofs of adobe houses, which is that I've gone up. My aunt, who now lives in an adobe house, the same aunt I just mentioned, a couple of years ago, I went to Costa Rica and I helped her redo that whole roof. And, you know, those tiles on the roof, they don't make roofs like ours, you know, that they make them out of these clay tiles. And, you know, one tile's like this and the other one tile's sort of faced up and the other one's face down, and you overlap them like this. So I was climbing up a ladder with all these tiles on my shoulder and making this roof. So yeah, I don't know if they maybe had, I don't know what the story, I don't know what happened in that situation with that roof, though. My grandmother always emphasized the fact that there was no roof.
It could be that she had no roof for like a week and she stayed with somebody else while they were putting a roof on. But in my mind, I had it that she was without a roof for maybe a year or two.
Yeah, I think that was how she said the story was. Yeah.
So go ahead, Daniel.
I was just gonna say that's true love, man. That's like fairy tale story right there.
Well, it was at that time that she was contemplating divorcing. But she really stuck it out, so that was, she stayed in Costa Rica then, from then on, and learned Spanish. She didn't speak a word of Spanish, and she had to learn Spanish down there. And yeah, that was the story.
Is your grandmother still around?
Yeah, she's got to be 90 years older than that. And she is right now. She's still around. She's kicking. She's doing great. And I hope she's around for another 20 years,
Yeah. But so she's in Costa Rica now.
Yeah, she's down in Costa Rica now. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So she's been there about 70 years.
Yeah.
Wow. She has to be the only person in Costa Rica from North Dakota originally.
That's probably true. I think you're probably right.
So how much did you visit, and how much have you been there in your life?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, we would go down there and spend. The funny thing about Latin American families is when they come visit, they stay forever. So we would, my mom and my brothers and I would go down there, and stay 3 or 4 months sometimes.
Oh, wow.
And then my aunts, my aunt or my grandmother or whoever would then, one year we'd go down there. The next year they'd come up here and stick around for 4 months. And my dad could not. My dad hated that, And I remember that was always really something else, how, we would stay down there for months and months, and they would come up here and stay up here for months. So I got a good amount of visiting through that way,
Mm-hmm.
Then later when I was in college, my first year of college, I really wanted to learn Spanish because I never learned Spanish growing up from my mother. And so I was taking Spanish courses, and I decided I wanted to do a summer study abroad in Costa Rica. So I went and lived in Costa Rica for 3 months with a host family that didn't speak English. My family in Costa Rica does speak English. So I was forced to learn Spanish I wanted to, taking classes in Costa Rica that summer. Later on, I'd go back and stay with my grandmother in the summer. I took 2 courses through the York University in Toronto, Canada, where I went to Costa Rica and stayed for a summer. And then later in grad school, I did an internship in Costa Rica, living there with a host family in the summer. So I've spent a good amount of time in Costa Rica, but only ever about 3 months at a time,
Mm-hmm. It sounds like something that you've continually gone back to. Like you didn't just go as a kid and then stop.
Yeah. When I was growing up, we always knew that we were Costa Rican, but, my mother spoke English perfectly fluently as a second language. And though none of us spoke Spanish, my brothers nor my dad, none of us spoke Spanish. So I always wanted to learn Spanish so that I could understand that part of my family, that when I went to Costa Rica, I could meet my cousins and know what they're saying and learn about the history and all of that. I promised my grandfather that I would learn Spanish, and he died the Christmas of my freshman year in college. So right at the semester point, he died. And it was that next summer that I went down to live with that host family and really seriously learn Spanish. So I fulfilled my promise to my grandfather, but I wasn't ever able to speak to my grandfather in Spanish, which is something I always regret,
But you get to share it with your mom, who, when I came and visited you, you guys would always be going back and forth in Spanish, talking about ingredients or vegetables that are growing in the garden. And I always thought that was the coolest thing. And your dad, I never knew if he really understood, but he always would just nod in comprehension, as if he understood everything going on.
Yeah, no, he doesn't understand a word of Spanish. He only knows when we were growing up, he'd say, "You want more milk? Sí or no? Sí or no?" And sí or no means yes or no.
Right.
Are you done? Sí or no?
Did your brothers ever pick up Spanish?
No, they never did. They never learned it.
Are you the middle or the youngest?
I'm the youngest.
Okay, because you had referenced an older brother. So, yeah, got it.
Yep.
Do you like being the youngest?
Yeah, it's got its ups and downs, you know. Though overall, I like it. I think I got the best deal, you know.
Yeah, the oldest kid probably your oldest brother probably thinks he's the experimental kid like I do. The middle kid,
yeah.
they complain about everything. I haven't met a middle kid who doesn't. And then the youngest one gets the benefit of the experiences of the older siblings.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
I always tell a funny. Well, I was gonna say I always tell a funny story about, you know, my dad growing up was a real hard ass, and but when he turned 60, he quit caring about anything. Yeah, he didn't nothing. So, you know, he turned 60. That was right when I was in high school. So I remember when my oldest brothers were going through high school, they were put through the ringer. You know, I remember my brother Andrew, the middle brother, did bad on some test or something, and you know, my dad made him come over after school. Andrew would have to bring all his books to my dad's office and sit there and study and fill out job applications. You know, and whereas when I was in high school, there was, you know, anything goes. It didn't even matter.
So he turned 60. He's just like, yeah, I'm done.
He was done.
Hey, back to Costa Rica real quickly. Besides family, obviously you have a massive affinity for your family, which I think is awesome. What do you like most about Costa Rica?
Let's see. Well, I would say the thing I like the most about Costa Rica, well, it's beautiful. The biodiversity, you know, the nature is remarkable. I think Costa Rica has the most biodiversity per square mile than any other nation in the world. You know, there's species of insects and plants that have never even been discovered before that are there in Costa Rica. So I think it's really, you know, a bit of a treasure that we have there in such a small little country. And in Costa Rica, the other thing I'm really proud of Costa Rica for being is always throughout its history, Costa Rica has been a very forward-thinking country. And in 1948, Costa Rica abolished its military. It had a military in 1948. It abolished its military and invested all that money that at one time was going towards its military, towards literacy programs and universal health care, and you know, and housing and you know, cultural programs, and so I think those are some of the things that I really like most about Costa Rica.
Yeah, my experience is not vast in Central America, but it seems that it is one of the more advanced, if not the most advanced country in Central America. And it sounds like go ahead.
The University of Costa Rica, the national university there in Costa Rica, is known as the best university in all of Central America. Yeah, so they're very proud. They're very proud people, you know, set of people, and you know, in Mexico, you know, is the soccer team in Mexico and the soccer team in Costa Rica are always bitter rivals. Yeah.
Is the Costa Rican team good?
Oh yeah, they're phenomenal. I remember it was only I don't remember how many years ago, but I do remember Costa Rica made it into the World Cup.
Yeah. Yep. Costa Rica is not a densely or highly populated place, right?
Very small country. Very small country.
It's got great coffee the World too.
Cup. and yeah, surfing is amazing.
Yep, and good surfing. Great beaches.
Very cool. Wow. So you guys were playing while you had internet issues. What instruments were you playing?
Oh, I got the old banjo out. Played a little bit of Kansas City Rag, which is a Missouri. It's a Missouri fiddle tune. It's not exactly a rag, but I could play it. It's a crappier banjo.
Hey, Daniel, I'm getting a message that says your bandwidth is really low. I added really. It just says it's low.
Oh, really? Mine? Okay, hang on.
Yes.
Can you guys hear me okay? Like, is my audio coming out smooth?
It's ish. It's
Okay.
okay. Yeah, Aaron, this is a move that Daniel makes about every 3 recordings.
Does he get better internet somewhere else?
Yeah, he's going to a different part of his apartment.
Yeah, downstairs, if I get closer to the router, I usually get a little bit better signal.
Oh yeah, I heard that Wi-Fi doesn't do good going up and down. It mostly does good crossways, you know?
Yeah, like this. Right. Yeah. That's why it's good that you live in a single-story house.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, let's see, Aaron. I feel like ever since you were old enough to think about stuff critically, you've been like trying to be a force for change, you know, in the world, and you've seen stuff and you've wanted to improve the world and change things that you saw that were unfit. And one of the ways that manifested itself was your research in your undergraduate program. What did you major in again?
I majored in sociology and anthropology.
Sociology and anthropology. So obviously there's a fascination there with humans. And your research as a senior, your thesis was about drones, but it wasn't just about drones and the drone program. It was about how to effectively change attitudes and how to influence people socially and influence their ideas. So it was almost like half a political discourse on drones and the drone program and half a psychology or anthropology research on like perception change and attitude change. So what is how did that go, and like how did you decide on that body of work?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot to unpack there too. So just for the audience, when we're talking about drones, you know, nowadays we got all kinds of drones. You know, you got the drones you fly in your backyard, the drones that are delivering stuff for Amazon, you know, drones. I can't even think of any other drones, but the drones at that time that I was studying were known as, were the drone program as part of the global war on terror. You know, these were like the Reaper drones, you know, armed drones, right? Drones that were used to carry out the targeted killing program of the Obama administration. And you know, I had always, ever since, you know, my family had always been a political family. And I remember 9/11 very vividly in my mind, you know, even though I was just a child. And, you know, that moment had such a profound effect on American society, you know, and really, I suppose, though, really quite a bit of the world. And so when I was in college, I had a professor. One of my sociology professors was a man who was from Pakistan. And, you know, the drone program was being carried out in Afghanistan and in Iraq and other places. And you know, in Pakistan, you know, was related to that. And so really, I became interested in studying this issue of drone warfare through taking a course with that professor and through, you know, the really through the anti-war position that, you know, of my family and that I held too. And so in those days, 2013, 2014, it wasn't common knowledge that it wasn't public knowledge that the Obama administration had been using drones to conduct targeted killings. It only became public in about 2014 when the program was transferred from, I think, from the CIA to the Army. And so it was at that time that I was studying the way that the armed drones, the role that they played in the global war on terrorism. And and so I was interested in that, and that's what sort of prompted that study.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about the study and the symposium that you set up alongside it, and how you had to, like, how you organized all that and pulled all these people together.
Sure. Yeah. So what you're referring to is the teach-in we had, or a symposium that we had. And what that symposium was part of my research. You know, I had been reading about drones. I've been reading about the global war on terrorism, and I've been reading about United States foreign policy and what the Obama administration been doing and what the Bush administration been doing. And, you know, and reading about the global war on terrorism and the use of drones and the collateral damage, you know, it really, you know, decidedly put me against the war, you know, and put me against the use of drones. And in my mind, I thought that if other students like me understood the effect that this war was having on the lives of not only the people in Iraq and Afghanistan and other countries where we are, but also the folks, you know, who fly the drones, the service members, their families, the lasting effect that this war is having on so many people. I figured if these students only understood what I understood, they would have to have these strong feelings that I had about the war. And so I sought to see if that was the case. You know, I mean, in my experience at Truman, at the college I was at there, not many students were politically involved. Not many students were thinking about these issues or thinking about the war on terrorism. And even in many of our classes, it wasn't discussed. You know, the professors weren't talking about it or thinking of it, to the students at least. And so, you know, I'd seen a documentary on the subject, and I was talking to my dad, and he said, "You should show that documentary at your college. You should show the documentary." And I said, "Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to show that documentary." And one of the folks that was interviewed in the documentary on drone warfare was Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who's a very well-known, outspoken anti-war, you know, war critic, and who's a teacher at William and Mary, and who's a retired colonel, and who was the chief of staff to Colin Powell from 2001 to 2005 or something like that. And so my dad said, "You ought to call it, you know, send him a letter and see if he'll come to Truman to give a speech." So I did that, and I contacted Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. I asked him if he'd come give a speech, and he said yes, he would, and he'd do it for free. So I organized a documentary film screening where I got all these students, we watched the documentary film and we discussed it. And then I organized for the next night after that for Colonel Wilkerson to give a talk and to bring the community in, and he'd give a talk and then have a discussion afterwards. And in order to relay this into my research, the paper I was writing for college, my senior thesis on drone warfare, I figured I'd look to see how these students' ideas changed after being exposed to this information. So I created 2 surveys that asked them, you know, what are your ideas about? I had these questions lined out. What do you think about this topic? You know, I had a number of questions. And so they'd fill out that survey. And then after watching the documentary or after listening to Professor Wilkerson, after they, you know, on their way out the door, they'd fill out another survey. And then I would see how, if their attitudes changed at all, or what effect this documentary or this presentation, or what effect learning about the drone program had on these students.
Do you remember any
sort of the second half of my...
Sorry, do you remember any specific questions that you asked on those surveys?
Yeah, let's see. You know, I think, you know, on the one hand, I asked just demographic questions, you know, how old are you, where are you, you know, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I asked, you know, let's see, boy, that was a number of years ago. You know, on a scale of 1 to 5, are you in favor, you know, of using armed drones in the global war on terrorism, you know, or on a scale of 1 to 5, do you think, you know, I can't remember, Daniel.
Yeah.
I don't remember the question that I asked, but they were along those lines.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had this whole symposium with the document screening, and then you also had Lawrence Wilkerson actually come out, and the logistical haul and lift for you to do that must have been like kind of a lot. But you really just like strung it all together. And was it a one-man show, or were you doing this as a team?
Well, in a way, it was a one-man show. In another way, it was a team effort. It was, I went around to I went and talked to all the different professors, all the chairs of departments, and because I was trying to collect an honorarium to give to Professor Wilkerson, a gift of money to thank him for coming to speak to us. And so I went and talked to the deans. I went and talked to all these different people, administrators in the university, asking for them to sponsor the event and contribute some money, and quite a few of them did. And I'd have to tell them why I'm doing it, and invite them to invite their students and give their students extra credit for going to the event, and and so it took a little bit of organizing, but we pulled it off.
That's awesome. And you got no academic credit for that. That was purely something you were highly motivated to do.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what was the outcome for the post Colonel Wilkerson talk survey? Or
the outcome was really that, the outcome was that for the people that had the experience of, it was a profound impact, right? So Professor Wilkerson is a very engaging speaker. And, the amount of experience that he has from being in the military for, his entire career, to teaching at the War College, to being within the administration, from being Colonel, from being Colin Powell's chief of staff, right-hand man in one of the most fateful presidential administrations of our time. He's, the breadth of, so when this man gives a talk, it's really something to see. In fact, I'd encourage everybody to look on YouTube, to type in Lawrence Wilkerson to YouTube, and there's plenty of him speaking on YouTube, and I would encourage everybody to listen to it because he is a very powerful speaker.
Yeah, I've actually heard his name. I don't know a ton about him, but Aaron, anything you can do to help us get him on our podcast, I'd appreciate it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll see what I can do.
Cool. And he's still at William & Mary?
Yeah, so he teaches at William & Mary. He teaches a course on what he calls national security decision making. And so his course tracks throughout history the what he calls these fateful decisions, which are decisions to send American boys and girls, what he says, to send American boys and girls overseas to die for state purposes. These are, what he calls fateful decisions. So he goes throughout American history and looks at how are these decisions made and what influences these decisions to be made.
Back to Paul's question of like the results of the survey, the people walking out, had their attitudes changed, like on average, to be more one way or the other?
Sure. Well, I'll say that my survey was not particularly sophisticated. Yeah. So although my survey results did show that there was, there was a difference. In other words, these speeches made a difference on the way the students thought about the war. And though what was more telling than the surveys themselves was the fact that after Professor Wilkerson's presentation, students and community members and faculty members stayed until midnight, and Professor Wilkerson stayed until midnight that night having conversations, and they were having conversations right there among each other. And for weeks after that presentation, students would approach me on campus and tell me that that was one of the most powerful presentations we have had on campus, And the vice president of student affairs wrote me a letter congratulating me on my research. And so I think that regardless of what the surveys themselves showed, in my personal experience, I noticed that, yes, it had a profound impact on that campus. There was a reporter there. They wrote a story in the paper about it. And yeah, it was, I think it was.
And you could have just, done a purely academic research paper on the fact that the drone program, unmanned aerial vehicles, it's not a black and white program. It's just, there's nuance to it. There is still collateral, even if they say there isn't, and there's mental health concerns, and just all of the things that I'm assuming that Professor Wilkerson brought up in his concerns for the drone program. You could have just written a purely academic thesis on that and defended it in front of 3 or 4 professors, and then had it go into the void where all senior theses go. But instead, you decided to really incorporate this sort of social operation around it, which sort of started, like, it kind of rippled out into a little bit of a social wave through your community. If you had the reporter there and professors sending you letters and students walking up to you saying, hey, that was really cool. So it's, not just doing the academic part of it, but having the intersection with using people's social nature to, spread the word. I think it was a cool way to do both of those things.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Definitely.
Very effectively political, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah.
And I imagine Wilkerson being a career military guy, career Army in particular, he's probably approaching it very rationally, very logically, and I'm sure he supported whatever arguments he was making.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, he's one of the you could bring anybody to campus to speak out against the war, but to bring Colonel Wilkerson, that's a man who has experience, who was there. He oversaw the you remember when Colin Powell made his presentation to the United Nations? Colonel Wilkerson.
That speech arguably led to us going to Iraq in particular.
Yes.
Obviously, we were already in Afghanistan when he made the speech, but that was a pivotal moment for sure.
Yes, that was a pivotal moment, and that was in that speech. Colonel Wilkerson was in charge of the putting together of that speech and all the intelligence behind it. He was the one who did that. So to bring him in to speak there's nobody else can speak to the issue of the Iraq War like Colonel Wilkerson can, in my opinion.
Powell, Wilkerson, and maybe 3 or 4 other guys.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, that speech Colin Powell gave led to lots and lots of folks going overseas, and I think Colin Powell and I imagine Colonel Wilkerson, I think they both regret it that day. But they came at it from an honest place.
Yeah. And I'd encourage everybody, all the listeners out there in Radioland, to please do look up Professor Wilkerson. He talks on cable news. He talks all over the place, and especially to listen to some of his talks regarding the lead up to the Iraq War. If you want a real education, that'd be one place to begin.
Yeah, and I would love to add more to this conversation, Aaron, but my senior thesis was on Elizabeth Gurley Brown being thrown out of the ACLU for being communist in the 1930s.
Oh, really?
I can't really. I had to get that in there. Sorry.
Now, I'm unfamiliar with that. Can you tell me?
No. It was a long time ago. I've forgotten most of that.
Well, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, same here.
It's nowhere. This was before the internet, guys.
Oh, no. So, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say, Aaron, what are you doing these days?
So, Kurt, today I'm working as a policy analyst for the Illinois State Senate staff.
So what does that entail? Like,
well, day to day, you say?
Yeah.
So what that really entails is on a day-to-day basis, in the Senate, we've got, their committees, right? Different committees on different issues. For example, the Executive Committee, the Committee on Pensions, the Committee on Local Government Affairs, the Committee on Public Health, all sorts of committees. So I help staff 3 committees. I'm helping to staff the Executive Committee, Local Government Committee, and the Committee on Pensions. And so what it really involves is, all this legislation gets proposed and filed, and then my job is to read the legislation, analyze it, write up what it does, what its effects are, how it changes the law, what the current law is, the cost, all the background, where is this initiative coming from, who's pushing it, why, and then to call up all the different stakeholders involved in it and to get their position on the bill, and to summarize all this information into an analysis, and then to go to the committee chairperson, the committee leader, and to brief them on what each of these pieces of legislation does. I think that's really what the job entails.
It sounds like a ton of work. How many briefings do you do, say, in a month?
Let's see. Well, I started this job, in September of this year. And, the legislative session in Illinois only occurs for a few months out of the year. So I got in, I had a few weeks in the legislative session, and then coronavirus hit.
Oh, wow.
And since then I've been working from home. So though before coronavirus did hit, we would brief the local government committee. That was every week. Each committee is every week. And so before we go to the committee hearing, I'd go to the senator's office, and right then and there, just a few minutes before the committee, say, this is what we're looking at in committee today, and go from there.
Do you like the work? Do you think you'll do it for a long time?
I love it. It's phenomenal work. I really love it. I love how stimulating it is, and fast paced, having to deal with curveballs and all kinds of stuff.
Do you ever have, do you have a desire to become a politician someday?
I've thought about it. I have thought about it. I think it would be incredibly difficult in terms of getting into it. You'd have to be bankrolled somehow. If it's by the unions or if it's by some association of the Chamber of Commerce or whatever. In order to do it, you got to be you kind of have to be bankrolled. I mean, shoot. Otherwise, what would you do? Have to fundraise? And I don't think I'm any good at that. So, I'd like to do it, though I don't think it would be, as of right now, I don't think it's possible.
You could be competing for the candidacy or the position of president against one of our former episode guests, Sarah Walt.
Oh, yeah, I listened to that episode.
Yeah, 2048.
Yeah, that would be
interesting. A Wall v. Albrecht.
That would be great.
Yeah, actually, I think so. Sarah and Aaron know each other, and they ended up texting after Sarah's episode.
Oh,
and
nice.
I think it'd be awesome to have them both on for a little bit of a chat. Yeah, I'm in.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about one more thing before we start wrapping up. I don't know that anyone listening to this has not ordered something off of Amazon in their lifetime, especially not in the last couple of months. So I think that everyone would be interested to hear from you a little bit about what it's like to work in an Amazon warehouse, that's what you did after, upon receiving a master's degree from one of the most prestigious institutions in the land. You went back home to Edwardsville, Illinois, and you signed up as a worker at an Amazon warehouse. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for asking about that. Yeah. After I graduated college, I remember, or graduate school, I remember that was so mentally taxing, so difficult, especially at William and Mary Shipp, that I remember thinking, boy, I want to do some work where I don't have to use my brain,
Yeah.
Though besides that, I couldn't find a job anyway. So I went home and got a job at the Amazon warehouse on my dad. I remember my dad told me, he said, hey, it might be fun. He said, they were really new state of the art outfit at Amazon, so when I was applying for work at Amazon, I thought it would be like working at Google where you sit on a beanbag all day. And they got ping pong tables and free lunch and everything. Boy, was I surprised when they put me in that hot truck and told me, you see this truck, this one, and the 6 down the line, those are yours. And so there I was loading those trucks
all day long.
Yeah.
Loading 6 or 7 trucks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What were the working conditions like?
Oh, it was tough work. I'll tell you, they made you work. They did. I remember, one time they had like a pizza party, how they sometimes do. And so at lunch, they brought us pizza and we were eating pizza and I ate I figured I was going to get my money's worth of this pizza. So boy, I ate that pizza and then I had to go back in those trucks and load those trucks. And you can't load trucks after eating that much pizza at all. And so, these boxes come down the line. It could be anything, for anything from from like a 45-pound plate that you put on a bench press, to a toothbrush or whatever else it is. And you don't know what's in, 50-pound bag of whatever, dog food or whatever. And you don't know what's in those boxes. And this shit comes down so fast and you got to pile, it's like playing Tetris in the back of this truck, piling it all the way up to the top. They'd give you this little step stool and say you got to step up on this step stool to get the stuff all the way to the top. And, but the shit be coming down the line so fast, there's no way you could get the box, walk up the step stool, fit it in on top. So I always tell people, if you buy something expensive like a computer, do not buy it from Amazon, because the way people throw this shit around, you wouldn't believe it. I'm surprised not every laptop shows up broken from Amazon.
Yeah, everything I order on Amazon is pretty durable, and I would never take something delicate and hope that whoever's working in all these gazillions of warehouses, thousands of trucks, there's no way you can guarantee quality control for that.
Yeah. And I'll say that, if I may, just on the topic of working conditions at Amazon, many people have been probably reading in the newspapers and stuff. Well, probably not in the mainstream newspapers, but in independent newspapers about the working conditions at Amazon. And even now today, in the age of COVID-19, there's been quite a few wildcat strikes that have happened at Amazon warehouses across the United States. And in some places, the Amazon workers are, working to form unions. The thing that's most taxing about working at Amazon, other than the fact that, it's high pressure work, fast paced work, is the mental strain of the work. It's repetitive work, where you're not allowed to stand around and talk to your buddies. You stay on task at every moment. They measure this, right? So everybody has a little scanning gun in their hand. And, whatever you do, say, for example, if you're getting an item off the shelf, you scan the item, and then whenever you go get your next item, you scan that. And the computer measures the amount of time in between scans. And for any bit of time that exceeds a certain amount of time, that's considered time off task. So, and then at the end of the day, if you've collected a certain amount of time off task, more than 30 minutes, you're given a demerit, a warning. And, if you get 3 warnings, you're fired. And if you are the one who has if you do have however much time off task at the end of the day, you have to go talk to the manager, and the manager reams your ass and tells you, what in the hell were you doing? So you can't, you got to be careful going to the bathroom, you can't waste time at any moment. You can't talk to your buddies. If you go to the bathroom, you got to be quick. The other thing is that, there are so many people in these warehouses. You may be on your job, but with all the people in the way, you're still racking up time off task. And besides that part of the pressure of the work, I remember a girl got in our warehouse, we'd arrive at 7:00 in the morning, and they'd have this music on blasting loud, this music, rock and roll music playing loud. And they, be clapping their hands saying, okay, let's go. We got to go, fast start. And one girl who happened to walk in late, everybody was in such a rush to fast start that one of the fellas ran this girl over in the picker. They call it a picker, one of those, it's like a forklift.
Like a forklift, yeah.
Yeah, one of the warehouse pieces of machinery. Ran this girl over, ran over her leg and broke her leg, and she was screaming, caught under the forklift thing, the cherry picker, and nobody could hear her scream because of fast start. They were playing the music so loud. And
so how long did you last in that job?
I was there for a year and about 3 months.
That's longer than I think the average person stays there. It has to be, right?
I think so. Yeah. I was of my cohort of hires, there was probably about 20 of us hired. By the time I left, there were only 2 of us left.
Yeah, I bet.
A number of them got hurt. One of them hurt his back. A number of them got hurt.
Wow. Hey, so there's no way to transition to this smoothly.
Sure.
So we started with the St. Louis Blues championship baseball cap that you're wearing.
Yeah.
My alma mater ended up winning the NCAA basketball championship. And
no kidding.
One silver lining of COVID-19 is the Blues are probably going to be the champs for 2 years.
I'll take it.
Why not? Unless we think the NHL's somehow going to miraculously play later in the year.
Right. I don't know. I don't know what to think.
Yeah, I don't either.
Oh, man. That's pretty funny.
Hey, so if we wanted to go down to Costa Rica, you could hook us up?
Oh, I'll take you down.
All right. I love it.
Dude, Aaron and I have talked about how when we get older, we're just going to build a cabin out there, buy some land and farm some stuff out there, grow some coffee or something.
And
I think it'd be great.
And you know that you need a roof for the house.
Right. That we know. We know that now.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Paul. Close us out.
No. So fiddle music, I kind of want you guys to play right now, but you guys seem to be a little reluctant to play.
Well, I'd like to, but my fiddle's down in Edwardsville, so I don't have it with me right now.
You're without your fiddle?
Yeah, I decided to leave it home.
Well, hey, so I know you were talking about employment and health benefits, but do you ever see yourself playing music professionally?
No, not the kind of music I play. There's not too much of a market for it.
Yeah, fair enough. But you really enjoy doing it, so it's all good.
Yeah, and it's also, I think it's really cool that you worked at an Amazon warehouse, meaning like you worked a minimum wage job, because Pete McMahon, you didn't mention this when you were talking about him before, but one of the Missouri greats, you always say he put tires on car for a living. He went all over the state and even states beyond and won contests, but his day in, day out job was blue collar, honest, hard work. And so I think it adds like credibility. It's some kind of credibility to who you are as a fiddler, not just as a person, that you've worked in a minimum wage, like blue collar condition. I don't know if that's something that you were cognizant of while you were doing it, but that's something I noticed.
Well, thanks a lot, Daniel. Thanks.
Well,
thanks a lot.
He certainly earned the cutoff flannel shirt.
You better believe I earned it.
Yeah. Now get outside and chop some of those trees down, you know. So Aaron, a question we like to ask all our guests is, as a 25-year-old, would you rather have gone into the military or try to become a stand-up comedian?
Yeah, I've heard that you ask your guests this question, and I've always wondered why.
Well, you can't answer a question with a question. That's not allowed on this podcast.
Though, what is it? Why is this you guys' question?
I have no idea. I think it came up naturally.
It came up in the original episode 0. Yeah.
Oh, really? Did it?
So the original, the original episode 0 is no longer on the airwaves, but I think it just came out of conversation there, and we've stuck with it ever since.
Yeah.
Well, Daniel was thinking about ways to struggle, if I recall, and I think Daniel brought up comedy, and then I got on this little rant about how he should actually go do stand-up comedy.
I remember that. I do remember that. Yeah.
I don't think Daniel would be able to pull off the stand-up comedy.
Aaron, you're such a douche, dude.
Dude, well, we could tag team the stand-up comedy, and I think it would work. But neither of us by ourselves.
Oh no! Shut up, dude. I think that you'd be really good at it.
I'd like to think that I'd be good at it. And to answer your question directly, I would say comedy off the cuff. Though when you really think of it, doing a comedy show every weekend for 6 months with an audience of 100 people working on material, that could be pretty brutal. If you don't get your laugh, you get booed right off stage, and that's everybody in the whole town who knows that you're not funny.
Yeah, you grind away for 6 days, writing, practicing, hoping, and maybe your significant other or a couple of your friends think you're funny, but you get out in front of those strangers.
And you're not funny.
Yeah.
And it depends on, imagine this, that it depends on how the crowd is feeling. So many variables, how the crowd is feeling. Shoot, what you look like when you first walk up, Like I heard a story, I don't remember who it was, though I remember hearing a story of a comedian who walked out on stage, took one look at the audience and said, "No, I'm not doing this," and walked off.
Well, that's the other thing it takes. You have to have a thick skin. So he was predicting his skin was going to be pierced pretty severely.
Exactly.
Yeah, very
Though
cool.
at the same time, I would also want to add that, military service would be extremely difficult. I imagine. I haven't done it. I also know that it'd probably be extremely rewarding. Many people talk about the folks that they serve within the military being closer than family, and that I respect, I respect the ones who are able to hack it, and that I think I wouldn't be able to.
I don't know. I think everybody's got some inner strength they just haven't tapped into.
That's probably right.
Very cool. Well, hey, Aaron, it's been great talking to you, man. Really interesting story. Passion is certainly a big part of who you are. Stay passionate and go after whatever you want to go after, man.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. Really, I've enjoyed this. It's been so much fun getting to talk to you both, and really, it's an honor, for me to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, man. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe through whichever app you're using. To share your thoughts, head over to our website at podso1.io, and there you can comment on episodes or send us feedback directly. Thanks for listening.